A lot of people are asking why so many men today prefer to be alone. And usually the question is asked like there is something wrong with them. Like isolation is a failure. Like solitude is some kind of defeat. And what's interesting is how rarely anyone stops to ask men directly what their experience actually feels like. Not what it looks like from the outside. Not from what the stats say. But what it feels like internally to move through modern life as a man and slowly come to the conclusion that peace, quiet, and distance might actually be the healthiest option available. If you enjoy these videos, be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss another video. Because for a lot of men, being alone isn't about hating people. It's not about bitterness, and it's not about being antisocial, or broken, or incapable of connection. It's about the cost of connection. It's about what's expected, what's demanded, what's taken, and how rarely anything is given back in return. Most men grow up being taught either directly or indirectly that their value is conditional. You are valued if you provide. You are valued if you perform. You are valued if you are useful. And that lesson doesn't stop in childhood. It follows you into adulthood, into work, into relationships, into friendships, into family dynamics. Over time, a lot of men start to notice a pattern. When they are strong, stable, calm, earning, solving problems, people are around. When they are tired, confused, struggling, uncertain, suddenly the room empties out. So what happens is men learn, very quickly, that vulnerability is expensive. That opening up often doesn't lead to support. It leads to judgment, discomfort, or silence. And after enough experiences like that, a man starts to think, maybe it's safer to just handle things on my own. Maybe it's easier to carry the weight quietly than to explain it to people who don't really want to hear it anyway. And solitude starts to feel less like loneliness and more like relief. There's also the emotional environment men are navigating now. There's this constant background noise telling men that they are the problem, that masculinity is dangerous, that male instincts need to be corrected, softened, or apologized for. And look, most reasonable men aren't saying they want to dominate or control or harm anyone. What they are saying is that they are tired of being treated like a liability just for existing as they are. When you live in a culture where you're constantly walking on eggshells, constantly monitoring your own words, your tone, your humor, your opinions, you start to realize how draining that is. Every interaction becomes work. Every conversation becomes risk management. And eventually, the question becomes simple. Why am I doing this? Why am I voluntarily putting myself in situations where I have to filter myself to be tolerated? Being alone means you don't have to perform. You don't have to explain. You don't have to justify your existence. You can just be. A lot of men also notice that modern relationships, especially romantic ones, often come with an unspoken imbalance. Men are expected to initiate, plan, pay, lead, protect, emotionally regulate, stay strong, stay calm, stay ambitious, stay stable, but at the same time, they are told not to expect much in return, not to ask for reassurance, not to need support, not to complain, and if they do, they are insecure, they are weak, they are not emotionally intelligent enough. So men start opting out, not because they don't want love or companionship, but because the risk-reward equation doesn't make sense anymore. When the potential cost is financial stress, emotional burnout, reputational damage, or constant self-doubt. Solitude starts to look like a rational decision, not a failure. There's also something that doesn't get talked about enough. Peace is addictive. Once you experience it, when a man finally gets a taste of a quiet life, a clean space, a predictable routine, no drama, no emotional whiplash, no constant expectations, it changes him. He realizes how tense he was before, how much of his energy was being drained by other people's chaos, and once you feel that calm, it's very hard to give up. Being alone gives men time to think, to reflect, to work on themselves, without an audience, to build skills, health, discipline, and purpose without needing a validation. And contrary to what some people think, that's not isolation, that's self-respect. A lot of men also feel like their loyalty has been punished rather than rewarded. They've been the friend who shows up, the one who listens, the one who helps people move, fix things, solve problems, offer advice. And then when they need something, silence, excuses, distance. After enough of that, a man learns to invest his energy more carefully. He stops pouring into cups that never pour back. And solitude becomes a form of boundaries. Another thing is honesty. Men notice that being honest often comes with consequences. Say what you really think, you are labelled aggressive or insensitive. Set boundaries, you are controlling. Express frustration, you are toxic. So men learn that the safest place to be authentic is alone. Alone, you don't have to censor your thoughts. You don't have to shrink yourself to fit someone else's comfort level. And that's not hatred, that's self-preservation. It's also worth saying that men aren't actually alone in the way people imagine. They are not sitting in dark rooms, miserable. They have hobbies, they train, they work, they create, they game, they build things, they go for long drives, they enjoy silence. They enjoy routine. They enjoy not being constantly emotionally stimulated, and that kind of life, for many men, is deeply satisfying. Men also see how disposable they can become in social systems, how quickly they are replaced, how easily their contributions are forgotten once they are no longer useful. That realization changes how you relate to people. You stop centering your identity around being needed by others, and you start centering it around being solid for yourself. There's also the reality that many men feel more accepted for what they provide than for who they really are. That's exhausting. Being alone removes that pressure. You are not a resource. You are not a role. You are just a person. And maybe the most uncomfortable truth is this. Many men don't feel safe being themselves around others anymore. Emotionally safe, socially safe, reputationally safe. One misunderstanding, one poor phrased sentence, one emotional moment, and suddenly you are judged, labelled, or cut off. Solitude removes that risk. So when men choose to be alone, it's often not because they've given up. It's because they thought clearly about their lives and made a calculated decision. They've decided that peace is worth more than approval, that calm is worth more than constant connection, that freedom is worth more than fitting in. And that doesn't mean men will always be alone. It just means they are no longer desperate to fill silence with noise or companionship with obligation. They'd rather wait for connections that feel mutual, respectful, and safe. Or they are content walking their path solo. And honestly, that should be respected. Because a man who is comfortable alone is not broken. He's dangerous, in the best way. He's self-sufficient, he's thoughtful, he's not easily manipulated by fear or loneliness. And that kind of man isn't withdrawing from society out of spite. He's stepping back to protect what little peace he has left. If you made it this far, you already understand something most people don't. And if this resonated with you, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because these conversations don't happen enough. and men deserve space to speak honestly without being shamed for it. And another thing men start to realise, usually quietly and without announcing it, is how often they are expected to absorb other people's emotions while never being allowed to have their own. You are meant to be the stable one, the calm one, the one who doesn't react too much, the one who keeps things together. And that sounds noble on paper, but in practice it means swallowing frustration, disappointment, confusion, and sometimes outright hurt, day after day, year after year, without any real outlet. When men talk about being tired, this is what they mean. Not just physically tired, but emotionally worn down from constantly being the emotional shock absorber for everyone else's lives. You listen to other people vent. You help them through their problems. You are there during their crises. But when you start to crack, when you finally admit you are not okay, the reaction is often awkward silence or discomfort. People don't know what to do with a struggling man, so they distance themselves from him. And that teaches a lesson. It teaches men that their plan is inconvenient. So instead of trying to explain themselves over and over again, men choose solitude because it's honest. There's no pretending you are okay for someone else's comfort. There's no pressure to be upbeat or positive or emotionally available on demand. You can have a bad day in peace. You can process things in your own time. You can sit there with uncomfortable thoughts without worrying about how they'll be received. And another reason men prefer to be alone is because they are constantly told they need to change. But no one ever really asks them who they are. Change this behavior. Unlearn this instinct. Adjust your tone. Reevaluate your mindset. And again, self-improvement isn't the problem. Growth isn't the problem. The problem is being told that your default state is defective. After a while, men stop trying to prove they are good enough. They stop auditioning for acceptance. They stop explaining themselves to people who already decided what they think of them. Solitude becomes a way of stepping off the stage entirely. And there's something incredible freeing about that. Men also notice how transactional many relationships feel. How often affection, respect, or attention seems tied to performance. Are you earning enough? Are you confident enough? Are you entertaining enough? Are you emotionally available but not too emotional? Are you ambitious but not obsessed? Strong but gentle? Assertive but not threatening? It's a narrow path, and the moment you step off it, the consequences show up fast. Being alone removes the transaction. There's no scoreboard, no constant evaluation, no feeling like you are one mistake away from being replaced. You don't have to negotiate your worth. You don't have to prove you deserve to exist in someone else's life. And when men get a taste of that freedom, they don't rush to give it up. There's also the reality that men think differently. And solitude gives space for that. Men process internally. They solve problems by sitting with them, turning them over in their heads, working through them quietly. Constant conversation can actually disrupt that process. But being alone allows thoughts to unfold naturally, without interruption, without pressure to articulate everything before it's fully formed. And yet men are often criticized for not talking enough, without anyone considering that maybe silence is how they think. Another thing men start to notice is how quickly empathy disappears when expectations aren't met. You miss a message, you are tired, you don't respond the right way, you are not as emotionally present as someone wants you to be. And suddenly, you are cold. You are distant. You are uncaring. That's very little grace given to men who are overwhelmed. So men simplify their lives, fewer relationships, fewer obligations, fewer people who have access to their time and energy. That's not antisocial behaviour, that's prioritisation. And yes, sometimes loneliness shows up. Of course it does. Men aren't robots. But loneliness is different from chaos. Loneliness is quiet. Chaos is loud. And many men would rather face the quiet than constantly drown in noise. There's also something else that's uncomfortable to admit. Many men have seen what happens to other men who give too much, who sacrifice themselves for relationships that don't last, who build their lives around others only to be left starting from scratch. Men watch that happen and they take notes. They see the emotional fallout, the financial damage, the identity collapse, and they decide, consciously or not, that they won't let that be their story. Choosing solitude is often choosing stability. Men also find clarity alone. They reconnect with parts of themselves that were slowly eroded by constant compromise. Their interests, their humour, their edge, their curiosity, things that were once criticised or discouraged, start to come back when no one else is there to judge them. And in that space, men often become better versions of themselves, not worse. Another reason men step back is because they are tired of being misunderstood, of explaining intentions that never were malicious, of being assumed guilty until proven otherwise. Over time, you start trying to correct every misconception. You stop defending your character, you let people believe what they want, and you remove yourself from the situation entirely. Solitude doesn't argue with you. It doesn't misinterpret you. It doesn't project onto you. And then there's the question of effort. Men notice how often they are expected to initiate everything: conversations, plans, dates, reconciliation, apologies, and after a while they ask themselves a simple question: if I stop reaching out, does anyone reach back? For many men, the answer is no. And that realization changes you. It teaches you who actually values your presence versus who just enjoys your effort. And once you see that clearly, you can't unsee it. So men pull back. They invest where effort is mutual, or they invest in themselves. Being alone also allows men to rebuild trust slowly. Instead of giving it freely and regretting it later, it creates distance from manipulation, guilt, and emotional leverage. You can say no without explanation. You can walk away without a dramatic exit. And that's power. A quiet kind of power. Men don't talk about this often, but many of them feel more like themselves when no one else is watching. When they are not being evaluated, judged, or measured against expectations they never agreed to. Solitude gives that back to them. So when people ask why men prefer to be alone, maybe the better question is why being around others has become so exhausting for them. Why connection feels more like a burden than a benefit. Why peace feels so rare that it has to be protected at all costs. And until those questions are honestly addressed, more men will continue choosing solitude, not out of anger, not out of hate, but out of self-respect. At some point, a lot of men stop seeing the world the way they used to. The optimism fades quietly, not in some dramatic collapse, but in a slow erosion of trust. You start realizing that most people don't actually want to know how you are doing. They want the version of you that fits into their life, without friction. The version that doesn't ask for much. The version that doesn't slow them down. And once you see that clearly, it's hard to go back. Men begin to notice that love, respect, and attention are often temporary, conditional things. They last as long as you are useful, confident, productive, emotionally stable, and convenient. The moment you fall out of alignment with that image, the warmth cools fast. Messages slow down. Invitations stop. People pull back not because you did something wrong, but because you are no longer easy to be around. That realization hardens you. It makes you cautious. It makes you quiet. It makes you selective about where you place your energy. And that's where the darkness starts to settle in. Because you begin to understand that a lot of what you thought was connection was really a proximity. A lot of what you thought was loyalty was just habit. A lot of what you thought was care was just really expectation. Men don't talk about how humiliating it feels to realize that when you stop giving, most people stop caring. So solitude stops feeling like a punishment and starts feeling like honesty. There's also a kind of grief that comes with this stage of life for men. You grieve the idea of unconditional support. You grieve the belief that effort will be matched. You grieve the version of yourself that for being good, patient, and loyal would protect you. That grief doesn't come out as tears most of the time. It comes out as withdrawal, as silence, as distance. Men don't disappear because they don't feel anything. They disappear because they feel too much and have nowhere safe to put it. And the darker truth is that many men have learned the hard way that being emotionally open makes them vulnerable in ways that can be used against them later. Things you say in moments of honesty can resurface in arguments. Weaknesses you admit can become leverage. Insecurities that you share can be reframed as flaws. After enough of that, you stop opening doors for people to walk through. You build walls, not because you want to shut the world out, but because you are tired of bleeding in places that were supposed to be safe. Men also start to feel invisible in a different way as they age. Not ignored completely, but unseen for who they actually are. You are seen as a role, a function, a background character in other people's stories. And the loneliness that comes out from that isn't loud, it's quiet and persistent. It sits with you late at night. It shows up when you achieve something and realize there's no one who truly understands what it cost you. So men choose to be alone, because at least solitude doesn't lie to them. There's also a resentment that builds when you realize how replaceable you are. How quickly people adapt to your absence. How little disruption of your silence causes, and that's a brutal thing to confront. It forces you to reevaluate how much of yourself you've been given away for validation that was never guaranteed. Men stop chasing connection when they realize connection doesn't chase back. And here's the part that people don't want to hear. Many men aren't afraid of dying alone. They are afraid of living unappreciated. They are afraid of spending their best years proving their worth to people who never intended to value them deeply. They are afraid of building a life around others only to be left with nothing when it collapses. So they simplify. They strip life down to what they control. Their routines, their health, their work, their inner world. They stop seeking permission to exist. They stop asking to be understood. They accept that most people won't ever really see them, and they decide to live anyway. That's not weakness, that's adaptation. And the darkest part is this. Many men have accepted that society is comfortable with their silence. That their struggles don't trend. That their plan doesn't mobilize empathy. That they are expected to endure quietly and disappear politely if they can't keep up. So when a man chooses solitude, it's not rebellion, it's resignation, mixed with self-respect. It's choosing not to play a game where the rules keep changing and the outcome is always the same. He's not isolating because he hates people, he's isolating because he finally understands them. And in that understanding, he finds a strange kind of peace. Not happiness, not fulfillment, peace. The peace of not explaining yourself, the peace of not hoping someone will show up this time. The peace of knowing that whatever happens, you'll survive it, alone, because you already have. So if you are a man watching this and this resonates with you, you are not broken. You are not defective. You are not antisocial. You are responding rationally to an environment that taught you over and over again that your safest place is within yourself. And if you are someone wondering why the men in your life have gone quiet, withdrawn, distant, or unreachable, maybe ask less about what's wrong with them and more about what they've learned. Because men don't choose solitude lightly. They choose it after disappointment, after betrayal, after being misunderstood one too many times, after realizing the peace is rare and must be protected. That's the truth people avoid. And if this hits closer to home with you than expected, if it put words to thoughts you've never said out loud, then make sure you like this video, subscribe to the AEM channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. These conversations don't happen often, and they matter, more than people want to admit. Stay sharp, stay honest, and protect your peace. Heads up, if you want more of this kind of stuff, I post a lot over on my Facebook page too. It's not clips or highlights, it's longer posts, thoughts, and observations that don't really work in a YouTube video. Things I notice day to day: dating, social dynamics, politics, mental health, just how people actually interact. It's a non-profit page, so there's no hype, no drama, no algorithm chasing. Just my genuine thoughts written out properly. If you like going a bit deeper than its short clips and surface level takes, you might like it. Links in the description. Now back to the video. I've had to take a bit of a step back from the Facebook page lately. I'm not posting as much, and honestly, I'm putting most of my energy into trying to properly kick off this channel. I've been grinding at it for about 7 years now, and it hasn't really gone anywhere. At some point you start asking yourself, if this is going to cost me my mental health, if I'm going to burn myself out trying to get people to think critically, then I might as well try to get paid for it. Just being real. It takes a toll. Over time your views evolve, and people really don't like that. They want you frozen in whatever box they first put you in. And when you step outside that box, suddenly you are the problem. It's depressing, honestly. You give it everything you've got, you try to analyze things properly, fairly, critically, and it just doesn't land. The media, algorithms, social media in general, they've completely polarized everything. It's always one extreme or the other. There's no room for nuance anymore. And it's just not fun. It's exhausting. I've also learned that when you are not appreciated somewhere, it's okay to look elsewhere. It's nothing personal. I genuinely believe if I still had a strong support base on that page, people would have followed me over here without hesitation. But the truth is, you'll never win. You'll never convince both sides. People I knew before 2018, normal, reasonable people, have become completely radicalized. I don't even recognize them anymore. Whatever happened back then, it consumed them. Talking to them now feels like politics is their entire identity. The other half avoid politics altogether. When I first got into politics, I really tried to do it the right way. I liked Trump during his first term, but I was always critical. I never saw him as some untouchable figure. Independent journalists taught me to question everything, to think critically, to never attach yourself to false idols. Everyone should be open to criticism. No one gets a free pass. So yeah, I'm thinking about doing a video just laying out my views on Trump. Honestly, critically, no cheerleading, no hit piece. I want to see if there's support for that. And if there is, I put it out and give my thoughts. The next few videos on this channel are going to be important. Really thought out stuff. Definitely worth watching, so stay tuned. Maybe I'll grab a Steam machine down the line. But for now I'm just picking up the free games from Epic and Prime, building that library, and getting ready for the digital onslaught. You can even claim them straight from your phone. Also, I've had two PS5 controllers break since I got it. While my PS3 controllers are still working fine, after all these years, I might need to update something, but honestly this is part of why modern consoles feel like they are failing. Anyway, back to the video. There's a lie people grow up believing that sounds comforting, but turns out to be one of the most dangerous ideas you can carry into adulthood. The lie is that being real will set you free, that honesty is always rewarded, that if you just speak your truth, the right people will stay and the wrong people will leave, and everything will somehow sort itself out. That sounds nice, it just isn't how reality works. Because being real doesn't make life easier, it makes it clearer, and clarity comes at a cost most people aren't prepared to pay. When you are younger, being real is tolerated, sometimes even celebrated. Kids are blunt, teenagers are emotional, young adults are finding themselves. There's space for authenticity, but no one expects stability from you yet. But the moment you enter adult systems, work, social hierarchies, professional environments, long-term relationships, being real stops being charming and starts being threatening. Because adulthood isn't built around truth, it's built around stability. Social circles aren't formed around honesty. They are formed around agreement, around shared illusions, around unspoken rules that keep things comfortable. People bond over what they don't say as much as what they do, and the moment you start saying the quiet parts out loud, you disrupt that comfort. That's usually where it starts. Small moments. You point out something that feels off, you question a dynamic, you don't laugh at the joke everyone else laughs at, you don't play along with the assumption everyone's pretending to believe. You are not aggressive, you are not trying to start anything, you are just not performing. And people feel that immediately, because when you are real, you become a mirror, and most people do not like what they see reflected back at them. You remind them of the things they are avoiding, the compromises they've made, the truths they buried to fit in. Your honesty highlights their silence. Your boundaries expose their people-pleasing. Your refusal to pretend makes their pretending visible. And that creates discomfort, not because you are wrong, but because you are honest in a world built on quiet agreement. So the reactions start. At first, it's subtle. You are described as intense, too serious, too blunt, you think too much, you read into things, you don't know how to just let things go. Language like that sounds harmless, but it's a warning. It's society telling you that you are stepping outside the acceptance range of self-expression. You might notice people pulling back slightly. Conversations stay shallow, you are included less, invited later, or not at all. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your presence changes the tone of the room. People can't fully relax around someone who isn't pretending. And most social spaces are built around relaxation, not truth. Being real introduces friction, and friction is dangerous in systems that prioritize harmony over honesty. Friendships are often the first casualty, especially long-term ones, because many friendships aren't built on deep alignment. They are built on shared history, shared habits, shared distractions. You drank together, you joked together, you complained together, but you didn't grow together. And when you start changing, start questioning things, you stop bonding the same way. You don't want to gossip. You don't want to perform outrage. You don't want to pretend everything's fine when it isn't. And suddenly, you are the odd one out. Not because you think you're better, but because you are no longer playing the same game. And people take that personally. They feel judged, even if you never judged them. They feel abandoned, even if you are still there. They feel exposed, even if you say nothing about them directly. So they distance themselves, or they criticize you, or they frame your growth as arrogance, as negativity, as ego. You've changed, they say. What that usually means is you are no longer predictable, and unpredictability is threatening. The same thing goes in social circles. Groups have an unspoken emotional contract. You show up, you maintain the vibe, you don't destabilize anything. You don't challenge the group's identity. You don't force anyone to reflect too deeply. You keep things light enough to stay comfortable. Being real breaks that contract. You start asking why certain behaviors are normalized, why certain people are always tolerated, why the same issues keep repeating, why everyone complains but nothing changes, and suddenly you are not fun anymore. You are a problem, a buzzkill, someone who takes things too seriously. And slowly, the group corrects itself by removing you, not aggressively, quietly. You just stop getting invited. Jobs react even faster. Because workplaces don't care about who you are, they care about how well you fit in. And fit in requires suppression. It requires emotional restraint. It requires knowing when not to speak, knowing how to disagree without actually disagreeing, knowing how to be honest without being honest. When you are real at work, you don't just risk conflict, you risk exposing power. You question decisions, you point out inconsistencies, you refuse to fake enthusiasm. You don't blindly align. Even if you are calm and respectful, you become dangerous, because systems run on compliance, not truth. So you are labelled. Not incompetent, not lazy, but difficult. Not a team player, not aligned, not a good cultural fit. And those labels stick. Once you are seen as someone who can't be managed easily, your days are numbered. Not immediately, not obviously, but quietly. You are passed over, marginalized, managed out, because being real threatens the illusion of control. And no system willingly keeps someone who reminds others that the rules are made up. This is why people learn to perform, why they dull their edges, why they say less than they think, why they nod instead of speak, why they choose acceptance over authenticity. Because the cost of being real is often isolation, instability, and loss. And here's the part people don't like to admit. Most people don't leave you because you are honest. They leave because your honesty makes their compromises harder to ignore. That's why being real feels less lonely, because it strips away relationships that were never built to survive truth. It removes you from spaces that depend on silence. It exposes how conditional acceptance really is. You are welcome as long as you don't disrupt, as long as you don't question, as long as you don't change too much. And once you realize that, you can't unsee it. You start noticing how many relationships are transactional, how many conversations are performances, how often people bond over avoidance instead of connection. And that awareness creates distance even when you don't want it to. You don't feel superior. You feel alienated, because being real doesn't make you special. It just makes you incompatible with systems built on pretending. And that's the trade-off no one prepares you for. Truth doesn't come with applause. It comes with silence, with space, with fewer people, with moments where you wonder if it would be easy to just go back to pretending. And sometimes it would be. But once you've seen the cost of lying to yourself, Going back feels worse. So you stand there, with fewer friends, fewer invitations, but a clearer sense of who you are. And that clarity is heavy, because it doesn't protect you, it doesn't guarantee success, it doesn't make life easier, it just makes it honest. And honesty in a world built on comfort is disruptive by nature. If you've lost people by being real, you are not imagining it. You didn't fail. You didn't do it wrong. You simply stepped out of systems that weren't designed to keep people who refuse to perform. And that hurts. But at least now, you know why. So if you've felt this, if you've noticed friends drift, invitations stop, jobs shift, or because you chose to be real, know this. You are not imagining it. You didn't fail. You are simply paying the price for clarity in a world that often prefers comfort over honesty. It's uncomfortable, it's isolating, but it's real. And there's value in that, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. Go ahead and hit that like button. It helps more than you think. And if you want to see more of these raw, honest conversations, the ones that cut through the surface and talk about the truth no one else will, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to help this channel grow. Because these are the conversations we rarely have, but desperately need. And the more we face them, the less alone we feel. Stay aware, stay honest, and remember, the world may not reward truth, but it's still worth speaking.